in-person learning again, but specifically in California and specifically in Northern California. I'm going to bring in Fox 2's Greg Lee. He's going to explain to us a deal that was struck today by California leaders that they're saying could put most kids back into school by March. Greg, what do you have for us?
Hey, Daytona, good afternoon. And yeah, like you said, this is much anticipated, what we've been expecting to hear from Governor Gavin Newsom as well as the state legislature. And basically what it does, it incentivizes, this is not a mandate, it's an incentive. So school districts are incentivized by this $2 billion pool in which if they go back to some form of in-person learning based on the tier of reopening where the state is. I know this is confusing, but basically based on what your case rate is, if you introduce some in-person learning, your district is entitled to some of this $2 billion grant money. Now, the catch is it has to happen by the end of this month for these districts to be available. So not only does this create some guidelines and some expectations, but it puts a deadline on when these districts and schools must welcome students back. And it starts with the youngest students. We're talking TK to second grade for much of where this state is in terms of reopening.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into what these incentives are and why is that so necessary for these schools?
Yeah, Daytona, we're talking about incentives. That's that $2 billion to be used for health and safety. Things like PPE, things like spacing desks, things like ventilation in a classroom. And these are things that districts and teachers unions have been asking for all along in order to get back to the classroom for in-person instruction. And you said it in your intro. Part of this has been such a piecemeal effort in that local governments, local cities, local districts were kind of left on their own to figure out the process in negotiating contracts with the teachers union, creating a plan to move forward. So not only does this solidify a statewide plan, but it also provides some financial backing in order to allow these districts to move forward with the money they need to purchase some things. We should also add that part of this bill is a $4.6 billion injection for all schools, and that is to help mitigate some learning loss. So for many of these students that have been home for nearly a year now, it was March that we went to distance learning throughout California and throughout much of the nation. That $4.6 billion can be flexible money to help schools, help these students, to provide some other resources, perhaps counseling for some of these students who've had a tough time. So the state making a large investment and certainly hoping that that will get the ball rolling to a full in-person instruction model.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I mean, getting everything back and going, is there a roadmap for all of these teachers, all of the administration, and all of the kids to get back to this new normal? Do they have that all planned out?
Right, so this is kind of a process, right? So when we talk about the purple tier or the most restrictive as per California's reopening guidelines, this grant and this incentive is for TK through second. For the red tier, which San Mateo and Marin County are now in, which means the case rate is lower, they are required in order to receive this grant to have TK through sixth grade, as well as a grade from middle and high school. So you're starting to see this trickle effect, and the governor said today that he hopes by next school year, the fall, that perhaps we can start to see the ball rolling, moving towards a full-on in-person instruction process. But obviously that is dependent on the vaccine rollout as well as what we're seeing in terms of case rate with these variants.
Yeah, Greg, this is kind of a different, I guess, sector of this story, but I know there's been several lawsuits in Northern California against the school district involving the city and whatnot. Do you know what the latest is on that? Is there still legal issues with the school districts?
Right. So there are many pieces of this. You're talking about localities, which is part of the issue. The San Francisco Unified School District is being sued by the city itself. And you consider the state has more than 1,000 school districts. So each is going through its own process and figuring this out. And I think the state's role in putting forward this bill that they hope to pass on Thursday, again, creates kind of that uniform baseline of what things will look like moving forward. And we should also say, in working with the unions, like the California Teachers Association, one of their requests was that all teachers be vaccinated before they go back at all. But now we're seeing them start to bend to that a little bit, because as of today, California is setting aside 10% of its weekly doses to give to teachers specifically and exclusively.
Yep, this is definitely a puzzle right now, and I think they're trying to put the pieces together, and it's something that we'll be following, and I'm sure you will too, hopefully here on News Now from Fox. We'll talk to you again soon. Greg Lee out there in San Francisco for us. Greg, we'll talk to you.
I'm just going to give a countdown, like 3, 2, 1. So I want to touch on sexual assault allegations.
And because, like we've said, we can play some of these briefings in their entirety, full press conferences. Let's go out to those remarks from Governor Newsom earlier today. We'll play that out for you as he mentions not only the reopening of these schools, but also vaccination efforts.